Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show, another exciting guest. Today we're going to go all the way to Vancouver, Canada. We've been getting a lot of people from Canada on the show. I'm impressed. I'm starting to be that bridge between the U.S. and Canada. I think the president might want to holler at me about how I'm doing this. But I can't do it without having great guests. And it's beautiful to have this lady on the show. You probably remember her from Jessica Javen's talk. And the good part about being behind the scenes producing shows, I get to listen to some extraordinary people. And this lady in particular caught my attention because it was like she was reading my mind. I would almost call it human identification. We see that in certain movies. Where I think law enforcement is trying to do that now, using human identification. Basically, is using people's emotional or mental intelligence to basically identify where they fall in line as far as thinking and whether they're movers or shakers, followers, leaders, and so forth. But with that being said, leaders, followers, workers, laborers, they all have a different mindset. We're getting ready to go deep today. This beautiful lady knows how to tell you where you fall in line based on your thinking. So without further ado, let's welcome to the show Dr. Bly H. Cleverly. Did I get it right?
You got it right. Thank you very much.
Boom. See, that's called thinking.
There you go. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Bly, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show and bless me with your presence all the way from Canada. You know, you talked about something that was really interesting off camera. We talked about the way people think. But before we get into that, because that's going to go deep, you got a PhD. Tell the viewers a little bit about who you are and what it was like for you growing up before we get deep into your story.
Who I am. Well, I'm a deep thinker. I have been all of my life. I can't say that there were a lot of people around me who were the same as me, so I knew that I was different. There were some people in school that were kind of similar to me, but for the most part, my family in general didn't relate to who I was, and I was raised very strictly, and education was actually forbidden. Or strongly discouraged, we'll put it that way, past high school.
Why was it strongly discouraged? That's I've never heard that really being said before with interviews with people.
Yeah, it was because I was raised in a rather strict faith, which is not something I talk a lot about, but it was discouraged to get worldly education. And so we were advised more to do volunteer work or go into missionary work. And so I was trained in theology more and in scripture, and I deviated from that. Obviously, I still use what I've learned in different ways, but I decided to branch off and study the brain, actually, and that came from a very strong family history of dementia and Alzheimer's that I determined I didn't want the disease. Mm-hmm. And I studied a lot of this in secret at first, and then eventually, it became known that I was going to deviate from the path that was set before me, as a person, as a woman, especially.
Okay, I'm a thinker, so I got to take my mind into the viewers and start to ask some questions on what they would ask. So when you talk about being deviant, so maybe I can answer. You can answer this way. You was highly forbidden to get education based on the faith path that you were. You ain't got to talk about the faith path. But my question is, what was it that made you had to realize in your mind something just wasn't right? Because usually when you're talking about following a path, that's culture related or spiritual related or something of that nature, it's very well documented. You become indoctrinated in it, and it's hard to venture a path. By you being a outside thinker, what was the elements that led you down that path to say this has been going on for years, but it's just not the way I want to go?
I questioned everything. I'm a person who does question, right? And it's not so much. I shouldn't use the word forbidden as much as it was frowned upon. It was discouraged, and considered to be a selfish path to take to education. But for me, it was I didn't have enough of the answers that I wanted, so I had to go out and find them. And even with the medical system regarding, brain diseases, for example, there was nothing offered to me in the allopathic model that could prevent this from happening. And so if I had to take my life in my own hands, my brain in my own hands, to make sure I wasn't going to get dementia. And that was a very strong motivator for me.
How many other individuals, a percentage, felt the way you felt, and about what age did this enlightenment start to show itself?
I can't say exactly how many people would think exactly as I do, but if I were to take a rough estimate on this brain or neurotype, that I've coined, I'd say we are about maybe 20% of the population. That might be an overestimate.
Mhm.
And for me, my thinking mind was very engaged from a young age. But by the time I was 14 or 15, I knew I needed to do something about it to take control of my mind, because it was just too painful to have a highly thinking mind without enough answers or skills or tools about how to navigate through my thoughts. So at the age of 15, I made a choice that I would take control, basically, of my mind in whichever way I could.
How did you do this without rocking the boat? Because I take it a lot of this was done in secret.
Well, the taking care of my mind was something that I wouldn't say that had to be done in secret so much. That was about controlling my thoughts. Now, actually leaving the faith that I had been in, that was later in my life. And yes, of course, it's going to rock the boat. You can't not rock the boat, but you can drift away from it. You can, there's different ways in which you can change your associations and your beliefs. And there's ways that are gentle, and there's ways that are not gentle, right? So I chose a gentle path, and I just kind of walked away from that. But when it came to my mind when I was 15, I just began to realize that I had to control it. And that became the beginning of my path, my own thinker's revolution.
Explain what Thinker's Revolution means.
To me, the thinker's revolution, again, another thing that I've coined, the thinker's revolution is understanding that we shouldn't vilify thinking. It's not a bad thing, right? You say, oh, you're an overthinker, that's terrible. Those of us who think, and you'll relate to this, Andre, if you think, if I say to you, Andre, just stop thinking, that's not going to work, is it? It's not going to work.
No, it's not.
But for me, no. And that's what people say, oh, just lighten up and stop thinking. Just don't think. Just don't think about it. Just whatever. That's not the way things work. It's thinking is not the problem. I think that a lot of people could do more thinking, actually.
What is the problem? Not thinking about constructive things that's going to enhance your humanity, do better for yourself, do better for others. Like what is the correct way that we should be thinking, and more importantly, why can't we think the way we need to think?
Well, the issue is thinking in the wrong direction. So you can think in one of two directions, one that leads you towards what your goals are. And if anybody is asked, their goal is always happiness.
Yeah.
They may tell me a path to get there,
Right.
But so you've got that goal of going towards happiness, or you've got, you know, going towards anxiety and regret and rumination, right? So one is more present moment. So happiness happens in the present moment, and you know, regret happens in the past, and worry happens in the future. And so, what direction are you going in? What timeline are you at right now? And so, why is that so difficult? Is because most people aren't here now. Most people are in the past or in the future. Most people are giving into, you know, all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing everything.
Hmm.
It's what we see. So it's difficult for us to model proper thinking when we don't have a lot of mentor in that.
Give me an example of different types of thinkers and the outcome that usually results from their way of thinking. What I mean by this is, let's just say you have a husband and a wife, you
Mm-hmm.
have the president, you have an athlete, you have an entrepreneur. Their brain waves and the way they think are different, but at the end of the day, they're all human. So what's the difference in the way in which all of these individuals think, and what is the common thread that they all have outside of just being connected brain wise and being a human?
Mm. You know, each one of those people could potentially be the same brain type or could not. So the common thread is we all have a conscious mind, we all have a subconscious mind, we all have a superconscious mind. Okay. But how do we, how does our brain light up? Let's say if we're looking at a scan, how does our brain light up? That's going to be individual to each of us. And it's not according to the profession we are or the sex we are. You know, there's thinkers that come in all different models, if you will, right? Everybody has a challenge of directing themselves and directing their thoughts. We each have that same challenge of knowing what to do with our thoughts, with our emotions, of examining what are our beliefs, right? That's all of our responsibility. Each person has that responsibility. So that's what we have in common. And then beyond that, it really depends individually on each person, who they are.
But do you think that sometimes certain information can either be received or rejected by an individual that can affect their level of what you call the revolution? Let me say like this: everybody can be an Albert Einstein. You know what I mean? Well, let me take it back. They can if the right environmental frequencies or environment is put in place. But the thing is, a lot of people may not know how to decode the information to allow that critical thinking or that thinker's revolution to take place within themselves. Does that make any sense?
You know, one of the key components of being a critical thinker is being open-minded. So if a person is closed-minded, then they're not a critical thinker. So that's a huge distinction.
So the critical thinker has a better advantage because they can understand and process information a lot more easier than the non-critical thinker.
They're open to it. So each person has the ability to process information, but you know, do they have the willingness to change their mind about it?
What are
So
some? Go ahead. Go ahead.
you can give people information, but they can reject it very quickly if they've decided that there is no other opinion than their own.
So what would that be called outside of not being able to think outside of the box? Is that a fear factor that was born within that person? Because
It's a closed-mindedness. And you know, it can change. It can absolutely change. A person can change this. So this is a distinction that I make with, um, well, let's say determination. Okay, when somebody is called determined, that's a good quality. They're determined. But the other side of that coin, what I've realized is the other side of that coin is stubbornness. So you can be strong-headed and determined, and it means you're going to go towards your goal. You're going to run right towards that, and you're going to achieve things. You're going to be driven. A lot of people with this brain type are highly driven and determined and motivated. But if they don't have their thinking in the right direction and they become stubborn instead of determined, it's the same sort of energy, but one is for the highest good and the other is not for the highest good. And so a stubborn person will block themselves from the learning that they need.
So not really being able to be open to accept criticism or information or all of the above.
All the above, depending on the person. Yes.
Who do you find that most common with when you're dealing with people? Do you find that more common with successful men, successful women, leaders, athletes? Where do you find the common thread there?
With stubbornness versus determination?
Yeah.
You know, I'm happy to report that the people that I work with don't tend to be too stubborn. They tend to be more determined because they won't be drawn to me if they're very stubborn and they want to stay in the same spot that they are and not move forward.
I get it.
Then they won't be drawn.
Yeah.
Right. So my business is called Fork in the Road. And by the time that a person messages me, they're usually at a fork in the road in their life and they know something needs to change. There's some sort of pain that they're in, some transition that's happening in their world. You know, oftentimes they're workaholics, sometimes they're alcoholics, sometimes their relationships are ending. They're having an identity crisis. They've lost somebody that they love, or they're just, you know, uncertain about where they are in life, but they know that they can't stand still. So that person is not stubbornly trying to stand still. They're trying to move ahead and fix their world and feel better and get more clarity and peace of mind.
What's the difference between a person that's at the fork in the road but don't realize they're at the fork in the road?
Usually by the time you're at the fork in the road, you realize you're there. Now, when you're approaching it, you may be in denial and not realize it, but by the time you're there, it's like you can't keep going straight. It diverges. So you can pretend and you can stand still, or you can go back the way you came, right? Or try and continue down the same path you were. But most people, at least on some level, realize it.
Let's talk about the critical thinkers. We was just talking about that with my professor, being able to think outside the box. And I found that the majority of people are not critical thinkers. And you've been in this field long enough. Is it because the indoctrination of belief, environment? What do you think some of the crippling factors are?
You know, I think that it's both nature and nurture to some extent. So the brain that we're born with, the way that our brain is formed, for example, who we are meant to be, the personality that's there, but also the level of curiosity that's encouraged within us sometimes is helpful. But you know, you can see this, Andre, even across some species. When I talk about 20% of the population, you could see this even in fish. And it's kind of interesting in fish, in a school of fish, that some people like, and now we're getting into the profile of what I call the HSP, the highly sensitive brain. I think it should be called highly perceptive personally. So when it says sensitive, it's actually not necessarily emotionally sensitive, but sensitive to the environment. That's their external and internal. But with fish, let's say they studied a school of fish, and about 20% of them acted different than the rest. So let's say they put them in an environment they're normally in, and then they put a net in that environment that was not normally there. Most of the fish rush into the net, but 20% fall back and notice. And they don't, because they're observant
Mm.
and they're analytical to some extent, and they preserve themselves. They don't get caught 20% because they're the ones that are seeing that there's a difference in their environment. So they're more sensitive to the environment. And that's the way that some people are. So why those numbers, I don't know. But I can tell you that it's across species.
You know, I love fish aquariums. I never really did that analogy.
Mhm.
Let's go here for a minute. You went back and said you talked about Alzheimer's and dementia. With your studies, what have you come up with to find to be some of the hidden factors that maybe we need to work with our brain to maybe minimize falling into
Mhm.
that trap, or uh, having it surface quicker than what it should be?
Yes. So diet plays a huge role, right? So the brain is 60% dry weight fat, and that fat needs to be replenished. So there's a thought that most people don't realize, is that you need to feed your brain, and your brain needs more fats. Now, if people aren't eating healthy fats, it will substitute subpar fats, and those fats, from what we call bad fats and from fast food, let's say, will fight for those receptor sites in the brain with healthy fats like avocado, for example, or coconut oil, olive oil, that type of thing. And so they'll compete with each other. And so the quality of your brain is going to be the quality of the fats that you eat. Now, most people don't realize that. And then consider, what things help fat and what things do not help fat. So a lot of people like to drink on the weekends, for example, and alcohol is a solvent. And what does a solvent do to fat? It melts it. So you actually begin to melt the lipid bilayer of your brain when you're drinking. And that's how come you act different. It's changing your brain chemistry. It's actually damaging the brain. The same thing with certain excitotoxins like aspartame or MSG. Those things are not good, not healthy for the brain, right? But beyond those things, we can detect trauma in the brain, and how your mindset is, and how you overcome things or you don't overcome them,
Mm.
is one thing that affects. I had written an article once that was called "How My Mother Losing Her Mind Saved Mine," and I believe, and I've noticed a pattern, that there's emotional trauma, that something that they cannot get over, they cannot forgive, they cannot deal with, that seems to be an assault to the brain, and then eventually they will forget. They'll forget everything if they don't deal with the things that they need to deal with. So there's many different factors, but we can actually see the development of this happening, sometimes up to 2 decades in advance before you get your symptoms of Alzheimer's.
You mentioned brain patterns being interrupted. I don't. Maybe you can shed some light on this. And you talked about um, alcohol, how it does things to the brain. I get it. You feel different and stuff. Let's talk about something that's really taking over right now is the use of marijuana. And you hear
Mm-hmm.
some people say that I perform better when I'm on it. I think better when I'm on it. And I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, and I was like, it's funny because I think they don't realize it. Because I was like, you don't realize how you act when you're on this stuff, do you? And they go, no. I said, and so they said, tell me how I act. I said, do you really want me to tell you how you act? And I said,
Mm-hmm.
you're like totally different. Like you giggle for a long time, you giggle, and then you just go off into like almost like a zombie state. And then I see everybody has different reactions to it. But my question to you is, I don't want to throw you upon the bus. I don't want you to answer if you don't know how to really answer it. But that's the new thing now. We've been hearing this for centuries on how that seems to be the miracle uh, 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 brain stimulator, but it does different things to different people. What's your take on that?
I go back to what the brain scans reveal. So I'm affiliated with the Amen Clinics, and Dr. Daniel Amen is very well known, very famous, and has conducted more brain scans than anybody else. And it does not show that it's helping the brain when people have marijuana. It shows some damage. So I would look at those brain scans. I mean, where are we going to look for evidence? You're going to scan the brain,
Yeah.
right? So I'm going to side with the brain scans. Now, are there some people whose mood improves for a time? Yes, and it calms them down. Yes, a lot of people lose a lot of memory. With that, some people become aggressive, some people become mellow. So when you alter brain chemistry, because brain chemistry is individualistic, you're going to get different reactions from different people. I've known, some people have said that, the oil, when properly done, can help to stimulate healing in people. I believe that has also happened, not necessarily of the brain, but of other areas. You're right, it's a disputed thing, and my goal isn't to offend anybody, but I would just say, I don't know nearly as much as what Dr. Daniel Lehman does. And he has all the brain scans, and they can certainly Google and look at those brain scans and make an analysis themselves and decide.
Yeah, I literally, like I said, I talked to somebody yesterday, and I know they do it. I don't knock that they do, but I remember the conversation. They didn't remember a conversation that they had with me.
Yes, that's
And it was
common.
like, Dre, I did not have a conversation. I said, dude, I'm telling you
Mhm.
verbatim everything that we talked about. And they had no idea. And I'm thinking to myself, is this really what I want in my system? If I can remember a conversation I had for an hour with somebody on the phone?
Mhm. Yes, and then there's different qualities too of what people get in that. Now in Canada, this has been legalized, um, and there's different qualities that people have of that. But for the most part, I don't feel more secure about that. Right? The
What
level
makes
of
you wonder,
people.
hey, you driving down the street and you can't remember a conversation or you can't
This is
remember
it.
your actions, and I got you behind the wheel. I'm thinking,
Yes.
okay, where do we really draw the line with what actually is working and what is it working on? And has there been enough research to validate? And I'm not knocking the use of it because I know some people use it for pain and stuff, but we're on the day we're talking about its effects and other things on the brain. Because at the end of the
Correct.
day, the brain tells you how to walk, how to function, how to do this and how to do that. And if something we recognize that it did do something with alcohol, that's why we have Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. That's why they do certain things. What's your overall view of all this?
Of mothers against drunk driving.
No,
Well,
just things that impair the brain itself. Because at 15
yes.
years old, you saw the symptoms of Alzheimer's and stuff. So my question here would be: is enough research been done with the brain and other things that deal with the brain and its effect on human response?
Oh yeah, I would go to the studies from Dr. Daniel Amen. He's done tremendous amounts of research on it. And now with the internet, I mean, there's so much information available that it's just a click away to actually see some real brain scans that will reveal things for people. But I do understand why people turn to substances, right? So a lot of times it's a distraction and it's a remediation from, it's an escapism from having to think or to deal with the things that people see today, and they don't have the skills and the tools in order to know what to do with that, right? And so they numb out.
And you're talking about, I don't think that the research has been put forth to analyze. I want to tell people right now, and I know you feel the same. I'm not knocking what you do. All I'm saying is I got to think about when you're around this stuff, the repercussions that could happen when you're not taking in accountability the research that you're doing on top of that. I think that now you're dealing with, okay, what's more important, business, money, or research? So I would think what you've done and what the doctors have done to show that there is a major difference between all this and the correlation to brain functions and how people respond. And we don't really want to talk about it because we want to line our pockets. So I guess at the end of the day, what do you think is more important? The less information on what you're teaching or the economic dollar with businesses?
Oh, well, I'm always going to lean towards research. I'm going to lean towards whatever I feel is in the highest good, and that's what I feel is in the highest good.
Who's been your biggest challenge when you talk about revolutionary thinkers?
I guess for people to understand what I'm talking about. So if a person's not a thinker, they're just not they're not going to understand what I'm saying. That for those of us who are deep thinkers, there's been an alienation that we've felt. There's been it's been excruciating to do shallow conversation.
Yeah.
and to there's a social disadvantage to that, and but also we don't have a community of people that we can claim this is our community. Where do you go and find other deep thinkers, right? So for a lot of people, they don't have those deep conversations with others, and they're really needed. They need that. So I give the illustration of people who are empathic, right, who are the deep feelers of the world.
Mhm.
They found their tribe or their community when some thought leaders basically said, hey, these people exist.
Mhm.
And then they could find each other. They formed a community, and they realized, I'm not the only person, I'm not crazy. And they could network, they could communicate together. And that gave them strength and hope, right?
Mhm.
So for those of us that are deep thinkers, we haven't had that. And so I am that person that's trying to be at the forefront of this thought leadership, of this thinkers revolution, to say, hey, we're another category of people, right? And so maybe we're not the empath, maybe we're the cognipath, and that this is the way we are. We're not trying to be that way, it's just who we are.
Mm.
And that we'd like to find our people too, right? And have that identity, so that we are the people that are most likely to make big change in the world, because we're thinking about everything and analyzing it, and problem solving brains. But we're also the ones that are most likely to try and check out of the world, because we observe more than most people, and we care,
How do
right?
you
So
how do you know? Let me cut you off. How do you know that you're a deep thinker? I know a lot of people are listening to this now. How do you know you're a deep thinker and different levels of thinking? How do you know if you are, if somebody's listening and say, well, how do I do a self-analysis to find out where I am on the spectrum?
if a person really wants to do that self-analysis and they're questioning if they're a deep thinker, they probably are. Because people who aren't, they don't want that. They're not going to bother with it,
I like the
right?
way you just go straight to the point. Well, if you're not thinking, then you're not a deep thinker.
Well, it's true though, right? So other people just like, this is not that interesting to me, and they turn on Netflix instead, right?
Yeah.
So but there are some people who say to me at that point, well, what happens if I'm both, like a deep thinker and a deep feeler,
I don't think
right?
a deep thinker can get bored. I'm just I might be speaking for myself. I don't think you can. I think you can get bored if the environment doesn't give you stimulation. Does that make any sense? Or
Yeah. So
my surroundings or what you just said. Um, Let me rephrase it. I need to be intellectual challenged,
yeah.
and if it's not there, then I do disconnect. But I try to find something to almost like to feed that hunger, so to speak.
Yes. So our inner worlds are quite rich. compared to other people. They need the outside stimulation. We can just sit and daydream or go in our mind with all of the files and tabs that we have open and sort through it for quite a long time and be quite amused.
Wow, I didn't do the matrix like that, but yeah, I like that. So, are you dealt with a lot of individuals? Why are people just really comfortable where they're at? I talked about this with a previous guest, and I guess it just, like you said, overthinking. Why people don't want to evolve and just get out of a fixed mindset? I don't even know how you could be comfortable in a fixed mindset. It seems like it would limit
Mhm.
so many possibilities. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, there's belief systems involved with that. Usually something that they were taught or raised with about what is possible. A lot of people don't realize it's possible to change your mind. And there are people who've come to me who've had terrible thoughts in their head that just torturous thoughts for themselves. And, they've gone to, talk therapy or to some counselors that have told them that they shouldn't question their thoughts. And there's no reason why they have them and nothing that they can do about them, which is terrible advice, in my
Why is it
opinion.
terrible advice?
It is terrible advice. So most people don't realize that they can change their mind or that it is possible to think differently than the people that are around you or the way you were raised to be, and that you can sort through all of your thoughts and you can select the thoughts that you want moving forward. You can change who you are. A lot of people don't realize that. But beyond that, there's a bigger issue there, I think, and that's a lot of people have the idea that this world, this life, was meant to be comfortable. And that's flawed thinking
Why
because it wasn't.
why wasn't it?
No, this life that we're living right now, and this is just my opinion, this isn't all about comfort. If this world that we're in right now was all about comfort, then it would look different than what it does for a lot of people, right? If you ask me, it's about growth. And growth is not comfortable.
Hmm.
Quite often growth is very uncomfortable, but it is the point. Growth is the point of this life. There's going to be pain that we go through, and that's not going to be comfortable, but we will grow from it.
Let me go here. See, you open up the rabbit hole. You shouldn't have did that. You shouldn't have did that with me. So some people would say that this is a learning experience that we deal with. I hear that often.
Mm-hmm.
Then when does life become heaven on earth? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear yours.
When does life become heaven on earth?
Yeah.
Why do you think it will be heaven on earth?
I'm just using it as a metaphor.
So when does it get easier?
Yeah.
When we accept that we're here to learn and to grow, and we don't take things as happening to us, we take them as happening for us, and we get the lessons from them, and we have a victor versus a victim mindset.
Wow. That's why you're on the show. You broke that down easy. Now let's go deeper. Let's talk about the mindsets and as it revolves in relationships with male and female. Why
Mm-hmm.
is it so difficult with different in today's society with men and women trying to get along? And the first thing you hear in relationships is we didn't get along. My viewpoint of this, I'm gonna give you my viewpoint. They're
Mm-hmm.
not emotional ready.
Okay.
There's a difference between being in love and being emotionally mature, emotional intellect, and emotional ready.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's just my take. What's your take on that? Because we're talking here today to the listeners, we're talking about thinking. And I think from my standpoint that a lot of people aren't emotional intelligent. It's easy to say I
Okay.
love somebody, but do you understand what all that consists of? Am I making any sense right now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What's your take on that
So,
as it deals
so
with
you're talking about
relationships?
like emotional availability. So some people are emotionally available, some people aren't. You've got attachment styles that are different. But really, men and women communicate so differently. So the way that their brains work is different. And so the way that I am, my neurotype, beyond being highly cognitive, that what I call the metacognitive neurotype. Um, I have like 2% of the population is like me in that my brain works more almost like a man than a woman in my logic. Okay,
Explain
that's
that
why
a little bit more to the
I cut
listeners.
to the chase.
Okay.
So I'm able to translate, and I've worked with a number of couples. I'm able to translate between the two sexes, and like when he says this, it actually means that. I'll say to her, and
Whoa.
and I'll do
Give me an
this.
example to the listeners. When he says sweat, this means this. To break that down a little bit for the people.
There's so many different situations where this has happened. It's hard for me to pull one out, but um yeah, I can't think off the top of my head about which one that I would use to cite for this, but quite often men will say one thing and it means something else to the woman. And when they tell me what the conversation is, I can do that, right? And then the woman might say this, but it actually means that. And it's just different socially, the way that we are different, the way that our brains are wired and how we communicate is so different, that for both of them to understand each other takes changing how you interpret everything that they're saying. So I guess the most common thing is when a woman says fine, you know it's not fine, right? You know that.
Mhm.
So just different things like that, but taken to much deeper levels. So what a woman wants is that connection and um, that feeling cherished and prioritized a lot of times. And a man thinks he's doing that by perhaps going out to work and bringing in money, and he's being the provider and protector, which is lovely if he's able to do that. But for her, like, her emotional needs are different, right? So it's about a presence that's there, and a man really wants to know that he's understood, but he's appreciated and he's needed. And I think in our society today, these things are a bit taboo. So maybe I'll step on some toes by saying that, right? That I think both people need to actually need and care for each other versus being just individual people who um, don't need each other,
Is
right?
there an,
So
go ahead, doctor. Go ahead.
yeah, I think there's a lot of mixed psychology here with the generations and how things are proceeding ahead, and even the sexes are confused these days. So it's hard to comment on that, but in general, you have to, when you talked about being well matched, you have to be matched in emotionally, and you do have to be matched mentally, especially for this brain type. For the most part, we are what I call sapiosexual.
Mm.
And so that means that we fall in love with the mind, right? So we need intellectually stimulating partners. And so if a person can't talk with us on our level, then it's going to be harder to keep that spark alive
Mm.
because it's a basic need.
Some people will say that they are that, but technically they're not. So how do you know if you have that type? If you're that type?
Well, you'll know if they're the right fit for you because they'll be able to keep up with you with conversation, and you will find what they're saying intriguing, and you will lean into it, and you'll feel that you're understood and that they're bringing out something up to the table versus just uh-huh, uh-huh,
Do
uh-huh.
some relationships, you talk about different brain types, do, let's say, for instance, one brain type is stronger than the other, but for the sake of the relationship, can that person's brain function, if it's higher, and decrease to match the one that's not at the same level because they decide to stay for the sake of love?
Generally, that person will go and have relationships outside that are stimulating to them intellectually. They will find friends and colleagues that they will talk to, and then they'll come home to their partner and they will accept their partner for the positive attributes or traits that they have. I've seen that happen quite a few times.
Uh,
But they will have some form of stimulation in their life, maybe in their work or maybe from an outside
so
source.
it's bound to
Uh,
happen, is what you're saying.
it will happen, and it can certainly be platonic.
Okay. Now, let's go here. Let's talk about, we hear a lot of this. Somebody says that they've been awakening. They're all of a sudden, miraculously, their intellect has gotten sharper, but it's become more spiritual based. What's your take on that?
It sounds like you're talking more about their intuition and their what people talk about with the pineal gland and the
Right,
third eye.
right. Share a little light on that from your viewpoint.
Usually, it's a dark night of the soul that does that. So something that you go through that puts you into the darkness, and this is usually the fork in the road as well. And then they realize there's something more to themselves and to life than they realized. And they begin to explore and to discover what that might be. This brain type tends to resist a lot of spirituality or woo woo,
Mm-hmm.
right? They resist that. And so, in order to talk to them on some levels, sometimes I have to appeal to them through logic, through the laws of physics or the law of thermodynamics, in order to say there is something more to life, you know. And perhaps, you know, death isn't the ending, because energy cannot be extinguished, only converted.
Could you say that
And so
again? That's why I had you to come on the show. Could you say that one more time? Because I think people need to really listen to that particular phrase. What was that again? Energy what?
energy cannot be extinguished, only converted. So you see that with electricity, for example.
Right.
It's just a law of physics. So we are energy. If you were to take, and they do have photographs of what the core essence of us is, biophoton light particles.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's evidence of that. That's really what our essence is. And we can read that. We can, you know, some electromagnetic field equipment, for example, can detect that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they do when they do ghost hunting,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
but there are people who detect that for health reasons, right? To see, you know, electromagnetic fields that are in homes, for example, around electrical panels, etc. But so there's that line of reasoning. But also, you know, I like to say, who are the people in the world that are dealing the most with death? And those would be the hospice nurses.
Yeah.
And you talk to them and watch for the patterns. So our brain type really loves patterns. So you look for the patterns, and they will say all the same thing, right? There's the death reach, for example, that people do before they die, within about 2 weeks before they die, where they're reaching up for their loved ones or talking to people in spirit that they had known. And generally when they pass over, you know, it's a very peaceful sort of thing, but you can tell that they're going someplace.
Yeah, yeah,
Something's happening.
yeah. It was so funny that, well, not funny, but it's funny that you brought that up because my best friend, you know, I remember it's like it was yesterday, man. We went to see a Marvel movie when the Marvel movie first came out. Healthy guy, you know, bodybuilder, getting ready to take his
Mhm.
wife to I think maybe the Bahamas or somewhere, and I get a phone call while I'm at the gym. Hey, such and such is in the hospital. I closed the gym down, went there, and he was in stage 4 brain cancer. He died within, you know, he died the next day I had surgery. I had surgery the next day. that they did his biopsy, and I remember it was me, his brother, and another guy, and the lady was like, "He can hear you, but he can't talk." That was hard for me to sit there
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want to lose my friend. You know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I got to deal with surgery. And I got all kind of things like going through my mind. And when I got out of surgery, he had, passed. But I mean, you just bringing that up, I can only think that, he's energy and that he's extended somewhere else. You know what I mean? He's gone to another dimension of life. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. 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 I believe so. Yes.
When you
Mm-hmm.
you dealt with, first of all, let me say thanks for coming on the show because I know you got a busy schedule. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to go here. You deal with so much brain research, brain revolution, and the whole nine yards. What is the most challenging part for you with your mission? Because everybody's not going to jump on the boat. You know what I'm saying?
That's okay. I don't want everybody in the boat. The boat would sink. It's okay. But for me, the most challenging part of my mission is visibility, to be honest with you. So I guess it's getting the message out there that people don't know about it, right? So um I can't help people if they don't know who I am. That's the most challenging part.
You mentioned something earlier about changing the mindset. And I say this when people say, well, what's the beast mindset? The beast mindset is the new evolution of thinking. It's
Hmm.
letting yourself know you can do whatever you want to do. Are you going to have stumbling blocks? Hell yeah. But you know what? You can go under, you can go over, you can go to the right, you can go to the left, or you can just kick the fucker out of the way and keep moving. That's that beast mindset. You talked about changing the mind. I remember, and I'm pretty sure you do too, that theory has to be somewhat validated way back in the day. Because I remember when they had in what's called asylums, where they used to put people, murderers, and they used to try to shock them into thinking a certain type of way. They was even doing this in medieval times. So it shows you the power that of the brain that people knew about centuries ago. What's your take?
Electrical shock therapy. I would prefer not to have it personally.
Yeah.
But I people have realized that the way people think is directly connected with the way that they act. But I think we've come a long way from where things were, centuries ago. The fact that we can actually scan a brain is amazing. The any specialist that you go to, if you break your foot, they're going to scan your foot, right? They're going to take an x-ray and say,
Mhm.
let's see what's going on, take your boot off, right? And if you go and you say, yeah, it hurts really bad, and they say, no, I don't take your boot off, I don't need to see it, I'm just going to guess what's going on with you, you'd be like, I'll go see another doctor, thanks.
Mhm.
But when it's your brain, right, don't you think it's even more important to have an image of that,
Yeah.
right? So it's like you can have a cavity in your brain, like you can have a cavity in your teeth, right? So why wouldn't you have an X-ray of that? And so yeah, brain scans. I do advocate for that sort of thing, not because I get any pushback from that, but because I had my own brain scanned, and I do see the value in it.
Why did you do a brain scan for yourself? I'm curious.
I did it to be sure that I wasn't going to get that disease in my family, right? It was like the sword of Damocles over my head. And so I determined that I would have a brain scan to see. I also had some concussions in my life
Yeah.
and some trauma, and I wanted to see how my brain was doing and if I had actually done the work to heal it, and I had. And so they could see where there was trauma. They could see where it shows up as shadow on the brain, but it had now been filled in.
Would you
So
recommend people getting a brain scan? It's funny that you said that because I told my doctor I want to get a scan and told him why. It kind of like Andre, you're not ready for that right now. How do you know when you're really ready to go to that next level? And the reason why was because my dad was in the early stages of dementia and Alzheimer's. I said, hey man, I need to, get that thing. But he was like, Dre, you're always using your brain. Is using your brain a good sign that you may minimize your chances of
Mhm.
of getting that? Um because I kind of wondered, I'm like you, I'm always thinking. They result
Yes.
when you have that, you resort back to your childhood kind of behavior. So I'm thinking to myself, what if you just keep elevating your mind with information? Would this somehow increase the brain's capacity for information and growth versus it uh, not going back to those, resulting in dementia and Alzheimer's and going back to that childhood state? What's your take on that?
It's protective in order to be, learning new things. You're creating new connections all the time when you're learning new things, right? And in particular, things that associate learning with movement. So, learning dance routines, or things that associate with language, like difficult tasks like that, or mathematics. So, different areas of the brain, right? But it's not a guarantee. There are brain surgeons who end up with Alzheimer's. So you can do it, and it's good to do it, and it's good to do it for your own growth as well. But it depends on what's actually happening, and there's certain different types of degenerative brain diseases, right? So if you've got the plaques, that's going to be different, versus if you have frontal lobe dementia,
Right.
for example, right? But process through your stuff, eat healthy, oxygenate, breathe deeply, and the brain is a muscle, right? So it's like you can exercise your brain, right? You can make new connections. It's different, of course, than other muscle tissue, but like you're building connections in the brain, dendrites in the brain, when you're learning things.
What do you think is the connection? Have you done any research on the connection between DNA, what they consider junk DNA, and DNA relativity to brain growth and brain development?
I have not researched that, no.
That's a new one. We have to dig into that. Have you back on the show and see what's going on. Is there a connection between that junk DNA and our actual brain? Like maybe we missed something. Maybe me and you'll be the first to discover what's really going on with all that.
Yeah, who knows?
Take our brain to the next level. You know what I'm saying?
hmm
So what's next? What's next for you, doctor? What's next for you?
I'm involved in helping to co-author two different books. One of them is actually with Jessica, who you know, and Will Lu Kang. That's the Future Ready Performance Playbook. And so that is more for people who are in corporate and about human dynamics and AI in the modern world. And then the other one is Business Life in the Universe. And that's actually being, Lisa Nichols is actually writing part of the excerpt for that as well. So lots of stories in those two books, which is kind of neat.
Mm-hmm.
I've developed a few assessments, and I'm looking forward to doing more speaking and teaching.
So what's the purpose of this book, and who is it supposed to resonate to?
Two different books. So the one with Will Lu Kang for the corporate audience is more for corporate leaders. It's a practical guide for excellence in leadership, basically, and success. And then with Business Life in the Universe is people who are interested in stories, right? So stories of things that can include all those aspects of life.
Hmm, sounds interesting. I'm gonna ask you one more question before we wrap up.
Mhm.
AI.
Yeah.
AI in the brain. I just had my English professor on, Dr. Mark Love, not Mark Justice, because I call him Love because he likes Kiss. And we talked about AI in the classroom and AI in human involvement. I shared with him what my theory was. I used to be an educator too. And he mentioned a guy had created a paper that almost looked like it was something he had written. He said something just curious hit him because he's an English teacher, and it was AI generated. My question here is, how has, I know you can't see into the future, but how do you think AI is going to impact brain functions for humans? Because we know the more information we feed into AI, AI can only grow as with the information that we provided, which there's a lot of information we got. But let's say today's generation can't even read a map. You know what I'm saying? They can't barely remember phone numbers. Life has changed, it's supposed to, from the time that we grew up to where we're at now. I tell my daughter all the time, my kids, you guys live in a great age, but with living in a great age, it takes away something from you. And AI has taken away their ability to do the work for them. How do you think that's going to transpire with brain activities and brain growth and development for humans?
That could go either way, but there was recently somebody who was mentioning, who does study these things, that he feels that this is going to be the first time that we're seeing generations that will be less resilient and less intelligent moving forward, because they don't have to problem solve.
Wow.
Which is a scary thought. Now, at the same time, there's an excitement about AI and how that can help us and how it can improve, especially I'm hoping in medical.
I was going to say medical field. Yeah.
Right. But this is where I think it's important that we teach our children common sense, because common sense is not common practice any longer. And it's essential for them to learn how to problem solve on their own. If there was something that we needed years ago, we had to go out and find somebody that knew something, or go to a library and find a book, or we had to actually, get our own answers through problem solving.
Yeah, but your generation be like, that was back in your time. We don't have to do that now.
Well, let's just hope then that the power never goes out.
I like the way you said that. Doctor, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. How can the viewers reach out to you, support you, and know more about your revolutionary thinking?
Well, my website is drcleverly.com. They can find me there. They can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, Blythe H. Cleverly. And they can send me an email, is probably the very best way. And that's info@drcleverly.com. And thank you so much, Andre. It's been a pleasure.
No, we're going to have you back. I'm a I'm a hybrid thinker.
You're a critical thinker. Yes.
I'm a different type of beast than what you're used to.
There you go.
I gotta have you come back. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you subscribe, like, share, follow, click that button. Sometimes all it takes is a click of a button to make a difference in your life or change somebody else's life. This has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.